I was 17 when my father first told me, plainly, sharply, that I was a failure. It wasn't the first time he had cut me down, but it was the first time his words buried themselves so deep that I knew they would never leave me. We were sitting around the old oak dining table, the one scarred from years of family dinners. My sister, Arpita, sat across from me, glowing like a goddess, clutching her acceptance letter to Harvard. My father read the letter aloud, his voice booming with pride. Then he gripped her shoulder, almost as if she were a decorated soldier home from battle. "This," he declared, "is what success looks like. Arpita is responsible, determined, and doesn't need anyone's help to stand on her own 2 feet." Then his eyes swung toward me. Heavy, judging, piercing right through me. "And you, Mira," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You should learn something from her. You waste your time chasing foolish dreams. If only you were like your sister, I wouldn't have to worry about you all the time." My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Arpita gave me a little smile. It wasn't cruel exactly. Half apology, half triumph. She lived on the pedestal they built for her, and though she didn't mean to wound me, every glance, every word only reminded me of my place in her shadow. "Congratulations, Dee Dee," I whispered, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. "Thank you," she said softly, eyes shining. My father didn't notice the bitterness laced in my tone, or maybe he noticed and didn't care. His world revolved around Arpita, the golden child. I was nothing more than a shadow. Growing in the shadows from the beginning, I was the invisible one. Arpita was 2 years older, perfect at everything, straight. A's debate team captain, piano prodigy. Every report card, every award, every victory was celebrated like a festival. Me? I was the girl scribbling drawings in the margins of her notebook, staying up late at night to sketch on her computer. My grades weren't terrible, but they weren't dazzling either. I was average. And to my father, average was a curse. "Average people never go far," he used to say, shaking his head. When Arpita scored a 98, the whole house lit up with celebration. When I scraped a hard-earned 70, my father said, "At least you didn't fail this time." Day by day, I faded. At school, I was Arpita's sister. At home, I was a ghost living in the shadow of her brilliance. But invisibility is dangerous. It breeds hunger, the hunger to be seen. The little fire won, week after Arpita's farewell. Party! I sat alone in my room, surrounded by torn sketches and empty notebooks. My computer screen glowed with a half-finished digital project, an illustrated story I had been working on. It wasn't polished. The characters were rough, the colors uneven. But it was mine, entirely mine. With trembling fingers, I uploaded a few panels to a small online art forum. I expected nothing. Maybe a handful of people would glance at it. Maybe no one. But within hours, comments appeared. "This style is beautiful. You should make a full comic out of this. Can't wait to see more of your work." Tears blurred my vision. For the first time in my life, strangers saw me. Not Arpita's little sister, not my father's disappointment. Me. That night, a small fire lit in my chest. Maybe my father was wrong. Maybe success didn't have to look like Harvard acceptance letters. Maybe success could be something he didn't even understand, the collision. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One evening, my father barged into my room without knocking. I was hunched over my tablet, headphones on, completely immersed in my drawings. "What nonsense is this?" he barked, ripping the headphones from my ears. It's my comic project, I stammered. Comic? He scoffed, scrolling through my sketches like they were scraps of garbage. Is this why your grades are so mediocre? You waste your time with childish doodles while your sister is at Harvard? Look at her, on her way to greatness, and you're here drawing cartoons. My throat tightened. For a second, I thought I'd crumble. But instead, my voice came out steady. People actually like my work. They say it's good. He barked a laugh. People? A few nobodies on the internet? You think that's success? You think that will feed you? Pay your bills? You're pathetic, Mira. A shame compared to your sister. The words stabbed me, but this time, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. I don't want to be like her, I whispered. For a moment, silence froze the air between us. My father's face darkened like a storm. One day, he said, his voice dripping with venom, you will regret that attitude. Life is not kind to dreamers. Then he slammed the door so hard the walls shook. The vow that night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my head over and over. Life is not kind to dreamers. But instead of killing my hope, those words fanned the flame inside me. I realized something profound. My father wasn't afraid of my failure. He was afraid of a success he couldn't comprehend. So I made a vow. I would never beg for his approval again. I would never measure my worth against Arpida's perfect scores and golden achievements. I would carve out my own path, quietly, relentlessly, until the day came when the world would see me, and he would have no choice but to see me too. The beginning of revenge doesn't always begin with rage. Sometimes it begins with silence, with patience, with the simple refusal to remain invisible. Every night I poured myself into my art. I taught myself design, storytelling, marketing. Every sketch, every late-night project was a brick in the foundation of something bigger. I didn't know then how far it would take me. I didn't know the sleepless nights would one day turn into sleepless triumphs. But I knew this much. The day would come when my father's words would choke him. He would be forced to swallow every cruel insult, every dismissal, every comparison. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to scream. The weeks after my father stormed out of my room felt heavier than ever. My success would do the He hardly talking spoke to me because I wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. I was chasing revenge. Dinner conversations revolved around Arpida's new life at Harvard, her professors, her campus, her brilliant peers. Meanwhile, I ate in silence, feeling the invisible wall thickening around me. But inside my room, a different world was blooming. Every night I shut the door, put on my headphones, and dove into my art. My little comic project had gained unexpected traction online. The thread I started on the forum now had hundreds of comments. People wanted more. Some even asked if I'd ever publish it. For the first time in my life, I felt the warmth of being wanted, of being valued for something I created. The hunger to be seen grew fiercer. A small breakthrough. One evening, after uploading a new chapter of my comic, I received a private message from someone named Pixel Mage. Hey, your story has potential. Ever thought about posting on Webverse? It's a platform for indie comics. You could gain a bigger audience there. I hesitated. Webverse was a real site, with thousands of readers worldwide. Posting there meant stepping out of my small, safe corner of the internet. But my heart pounded with excitement. That night, I polished my drawings until my fingers cramped, formatted my story, and uploaded the first few episodes. My hand shook as I hit publish. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, definitely not my family. This was mine. Within days, the views started climbing. 100, 200, 500. Readers left comments, fan theories, encouragement. It was small, almost nothing compared to the grand achievements my father worshipped. But to me, it was everything. It was proof that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible after all. Cracks. At home, but the higher my small flame burned, the colder things grew at home. One night during dinner, my mother mentioned casually, "Mira, why don't you take some extra tutoring classes? Maybe you can improve your grades like your sister used to." Before I could answer, my father cut in. "Tutoring is useless if she doesn't care about her future. Arpita was self-disciplined. She never needed anyone to push her. Mira will never be like that." Heat rose in my cheeks. For a moment, I wanted to scream the truth, that while Arpita was busy earning praise, I was building something of my own, that hundreds of people were reading my work, that I mattered to someone. But I bit my tongue. They wouldn't understand. Not yet. I swallowed my anger with my rice and dal, staring at the table until the meal was over. The slip still. Secrets have a way of slipping out. A week later, my cousin Rena came to visit. She was only a year younger than me, bubbly and endlessly curious. She wandered into my room while I was drawing, peeking over my shoulder. "Whoa, did you make that?" she gasped. I froze. Yeah, just practicing." "This isn't practice," she said, scrolling through my files before I could stop her. "These are amazing. You should post them somewhere." "I already do," I admitted reluctantly. "On Webverse." Her eyes widened. "Wait, the Webverse? The one with thousands of readers? Don't tell me you're the artist behind Fallen Skies. I've seen that on the front page." My face went hot. She had found me out. "You can't tell anyone," I begged. "Please, Rena. Especially not my parents." She zipped her lips dramatically. "Promise." "But oh my God, Mira. You're like famous." I laughed nervously. "Hardly. It's just a small comic." But deep down, her words lit another spark. Maybe I wasn't famous, but I was on my way to being something my father swore I'd never be. Successful. Exposure, unfortunately, secrets don't survive long in families. A few days later, while I was out running errands, Rena excitedly showed my comic to my younger cousins. They gushed about it, sharing it on their phones. By evening, the news had traveled through the grapevine and landed right in my father's ears. That night, I returned home to find him waiting in my room, my tablet in his hands. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up the screen. My comic was open, the bold title Fallen Skies glaring at me like a neon confession. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. "You've been wasting your time on this? Posting your nonsense for strangers? You think this is going to bring you glory? Money? Respect?" His words sliced through the air. "It's not nonsense," I said, my hands trembling. "Thousands of people read it. They like it. They care. About it. Thousands?" he sneered. "Thousands of fools, maybe. Do you think the world values dreamers like you? You'll end up broke, a burden. Meanwhile, your sister is making us proud." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. For a moment, I thought I'd cry. But instead, the fire inside me flared higher. "You'll see," I whispered. "One day, You'll regret ever saying this to me." My father stared at me like I was speaking another language. Then he threw the tablet onto my bed and stormed out. A new kind of hunger. That night, I stared at the ceiling, tears burning in my eyes but never falling. His voice echoed in my mind, cruel and dismissive. But instead of breaking me, it fed me. I realized something important. Every insult, every dismissal, every cruel comparison wasn't a chain. It was fuel. Fuel to prove him wrong. So I worked. Harder. I drew until dawn. I studied successful creators, learned how to monetize, built a social media presence. Every hateful word from my father became a reason to push forward. And slowly, my comic began climbing the charts on Webverse, from the front page of the Rising Creators section to the trending list. Readers sent fan art, theories, even donations. I wasn't just drawing anymore. I was building a following, a community, a future. And though my father still saw nothing but failure when he looked at me, I knew, deep in my bones, that the day would come when he'd have no choice but to see me, because my revenge had already begun. For weeks, my life existed in two different worlds. In the house, I was still the disappointment, the quiet daughter who never lived up to her sister's brilliance. My father barely looked at me during meals. My mother worried silently, but never interfered, and every phone call from Arpita was another chance for them to gush over her Harvard life. But online, I was someone else. On Webverse, Fallen Skies was gaining momentum. New readers poured in every day, my follower count climbing steadily. Fan art, long theories, and heartfelt comments filled my inbox. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. Each notification was like oxygen. It didn't erase the hurt at home, but it gave me something stronger than my father's cruelty. Purpose. The offer won late evening, while sketching in the dim glow of my desk lamp, an email popped into my inbox. The subject line made my heart skip a beat. Partnership proposal. Stellar Comics Publishing. I blinked at the screen. Could this be real? I opened the email. A small independent publisher had noticed Fallen Skies on Webverse and wanted to discuss a collaboration, turning my comic into a printed volume for distribution. I sat frozen, staring at the words. Printed. Distribution. My art, on real shelves. Hands trembling, I read the email over and over. It felt like proof. Proof that my dreams weren't foolish. Proof that I wasn't worthless. But I couldn't tell my family. Not yet. Not until it was real. The enemy I didn't see. 2 weeks later, Fallen Skies hit the front page of Webverse again. My inbox was overflowing, and my small following had turned into a community. I even had a Discord server where readers gathered to discuss theories about my story. It should have been the happiest time of my life. But that was when the first cracks appeared. Scrolling through the comments one night, I noticed a link someone had posted. Hey, isn't this just like Celestial Wars by Starseer? My stomach dropped. I clicked the link. Another comic on another platform. Same sci-fi theme, same type of characters. Though honestly, the stories were nothing alike. But side by side, people could draw comparisons, and some did. This looks like a ripoff. Didn't Starseer post their story months before this? Another copycat trying to cash in on someone else's work. The words sliced through me. I wasn't a thief. I hadn't even read Celestial Wars. My story came from the sketches and worlds I'd carried in my head for years. But the internet doesn't care about truth. It cares about noise. Within days, accusations spread. My follower count stopped rising. The supportive comments drowned under suspicion and hate. Betrayal. The worst part wasn't the strangers. It was someone I trusted. One evening, I logged into my server and noticed a username I recognized. Rena. My cousin. The only person in my family who knew about my comic. She was chatting in the general channel, her messages scrolling fast. Yeah, Mira's comic is good, but I always thought it looked kinda similar to Celestial Wars. I even told her about it once. Don't know why she ignored me. I felt my stomach twist. That wasn't true. She'd never told me. But now dozens of readers were seeing her words. Words from someone who knew me personally. Wait, so even her cousin thinks she copied? Someone wrote. The betrayal burned hotter than the hate comments. I wanted to scream at her, demand why she'd do this. But instead, I logged out and shut my laptop. For hours, I sat in the dark, trembling, my chest aching like it might split. Open breaking point. A week later, Stellar Comics Publishing emailed again. Due to the recent controversy, we've decided to hold off on further discussions for now. We wish you the best in your future work. I dropped my phone, my vision blurring. My chance, my proof, was gone. The walls of my room felt like they were closing in. I wanted to cry, to smash my tablet, to give up. Maybe my father was right. Maybe life really wasn't kind to dreamers. That night, when I finally left my room for dinner, my father looked at me with his usual disdain. You've been hiding in there like a recluse. What have you achieved? Nothing. Exactly what I said. I said nothing. Just sat down and forced the food down my throat, even as my hands shook. Inside, I was breaking. The voice in the dark sticky. Sometimes, just when the world feels cruelest, a single voice can pull you back. At 2 a.m., while scrolling through hateful comments with tears in my eyes, I found a message in my inbox. It was from Pixel Mage, the same user who had first encouraged me to post on Webverse. Ignore the noise. I've been following your work since the beginning. Your story is unique. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. If you give up now, they win. I stared at the message for a long time. My hands shook as I typed back. But what if they're right? What if I'm just not good enough? The reply came fast. Then keep going until you are. Success isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down. I read those words again and again. Slowly, the fog in my chest lifted just enough for me to breathe. Maybe I had fallen. Maybe I had lost the chance with Stellar Comics. But giving up would only prove my father right. And that, more than anything, I refused to allow. The seed of revenge. The next morning, I woke up exhausted but determined. If people thought I was a thief, I would outdraw, outright, outwork every single one of them until there was no doubt my story was my own. If my cousin betrayed me, I'd build a support system so strong that her words wouldn't matter. And if my father still believed I was worthless, then one day, my success would crush him without me ever saying a word. Because revenge wasn't about screaming at him. It wasn't about proving him wrong in arguments he'd never listened to. It was about becoming undeniable. And that path, I realized, was only just beginning. After the storm of accusations and betrayal, my world felt quieter. Not peaceful. Quiet like an abandoned house, full of broken windows and echoes. The hate comments slowed, but so did the praise. My follower count had stopped growing. Stellar Comics had pulled their offer. My cousin Rena barely looked me in the eye anymore, and when she did, guilt flickered there for a moment before she looked away. And my father? He seemed almost smug, as if my silence at dinner, my slouched shoulders, my tired eyes confirmed everything he'd said, that I was a foolish dreamer destined for failure. But in that silence, something else was growing. A plan. Rock bottom becomes bedrock. For days, I barely touched my tablet. But one night, I opened Pixelmage's message again. Success isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down. Those words dug deep. If I gave up now, I wouldn't just lose my dream. I'd hand victory to my father, to the haters, to the cousin who betrayed me. So instead of quitting, I decided to rebuild. I studied the industry. I watched tutorials about storytelling, pacing, and marketing. I dissected the comics that topped the charts, not to imitate them, but to learn why readers love them. Every failure, every insult became a lesson, and slowly I started sketching. Again, not to please my father, not even for validation from strangers. I sketched because my story still burned inside me, demanding to be told. If Fallen Skies was going to survive, it needed to come back stronger. A bold move. 3 months after the controversy, I made a decision that terrified me. I relaunched Fallen Skies. I didn't delete the old chapters, but I revised the art, tightened the story, and uploaded a brand new arc. At the end of the first new episode, I posted a message to my readers. Thank you to everyone who stayed. I know the past few months have been rough, and I've made mistakes. But this story means the world to me. If you believe in it, please share it. Let's rise together. Then I hit publish and shut my laptop, heart racing. For hours I couldn't look. But when I finally dared to check, I saw something I hadn't expected. Support. Readers returned. They left comments cheering me on, praising the new art, insisting they'd never stopped believing in me. Some even apologized for doubting me during the accusations. The spark was back. Turning pain into power momentum grew. Not explosively, but steadily. My Discord server regained life. Fan art poured in again. Someone even made a short animation of my characters. And then came the moment that changed everything. A popular Webverse reviewer posted a video titled, "Why You Should Be Reading Fallen Skies." In it, they broke down my comics journey, the early potential, the controversy, and the comeback. They called it a testament to resilience and praised my ability to evolve. Overnight, my follower count tripled. I sat staring at my screen, my heart hammering. For the first time, my name, Mira, the name my father spat like a disappointment, was being spoken with respect. Money talks. With the new wave of readers came something unexpected. Money. Webverse had a tipping system, and donations began trickling in. $5 here, 10 there. Then bigger ones, 50, 100. The first time I withdrew money from my account and saw the balance in my bank, I cried. Not because it was a fortune, it wasn't, but because it was proof. Proof that my childish doodles had value. And when the first month closed and I'd earned more than I had ever made babysitting or tutoring, I knew I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. I didn't tell my father, though. Not yet. I wanted the reveal to burn brighter. The shock at home, but secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. One Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen when my mother walked in, holding my bank statement in her hands. She looked confused. "Mira," she whispered, "where did this money come from?" My stomach flipped. She must have checked my mail. I hesitated, then said softly, "It's from my comic. People pay to read it, to support me." Her eyes widened. She sat down at the table, clutching the paper. You made this from your drawings?" I nodded. For a moment, she looked almost proud. But then her face clouded. "Your father must not know. She stopped herself. "He won't understand." She was right. But it was too late. From the doorway, my father's voice cut through the air. "What won't I understand?" We both froze. He stepped into the kitchen, his eyes narrowing as he snatched the paper from my mother's hand. His gaze scanned the numbers, and his face turned red. "You're telling me this comic nonsense is earning you money?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling but firm. He slammed the paper on the table. "This is pocket change. Pennies. Do you think this makes you equal to your sister? She's studying at Harvard. You're peddling cartoons online." Anger boiled inside me. For years I had swallowed his words, but now I had proof in my hands. Real money, real readers, real success. "It's not pennies," I said through clenched teeth. "It's just the beginning." He glared at me, but for the first time, I didn't look away. The promise. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. My father's words still echoed, but they no longer cut me down. They sharpened me. For years, he'd compared me to Arpita, worshipping her achievements while mocking mine. But now I had something she didn't, something he couldn't control. A community. An income. A fire that burned too brightly for him to extinguish. And I made myself a promise. This was just the start. I would rise so high, shine so brightly, that one day the same father who called me worthless would choke on his words. Not through arguments, not through begging for approval, through success so undeniable that it would become his punishment. When I woke up that morning, revenge wasn't about hurting him nonstop. Back. At first, I thought it was just another wave of comments or tips from Webverse, and I was ready. But as I rubbed my eyes and unlocked the screen, I froze. My comic wasn't just trending on Webverse. It, was everywhere. The viral breakthrough a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers had just uploaded a video titled, "The Comic That Rose from Hate, Why Fallen Skies Deserves Your Attention." The video wasn't just a review, it was a story. They chronicled my entire journey, from obscurity to accusations of plagiarism to my comeback arc. They called me a symbol of persistence for every young creator. Clips of my panels flashed across the screen, dramatic music swelling as they told my story like it was a movie. And at the end, the creator looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're not reading Fallen Skies, you're missing out on something legendary." My subscriber count exploded overnight. Thousands. Tens of thousands. My Discord server flooded with new members, fan art, theories, and heartfelt messages. And then the biggest shock, Webverse itself featured Fallen Skies on their front page as a top-rising comic. I sat there, phone in hand, shaking. This wasn't just a spark. This was a wildfire. The invitation a week later, I received an email that made me scream so loud my mother came running into my room. It was from NovaCon, one of the biggest pop culture conventions in the country. They wanted me as a featured guest artist, a booth, panels, and even a Q&A session. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be a spectator at an event like this. I was going to be on the other side of the table. I hugged my mother so tightly she laughed through her tears. But in the hallway, I could see my father, arms crossed, watching silently. He didn't say anything. Not praise, not criticism, just silence. But I could read his eyes. He didn't like it, because for the first time, my success wasn't invisible anymore. NovaCon. The day of the convention felt unreal. Walking into the massive hall, I was surrounded by banners, lights, and thousands of fans. When I reached my booth, my heart skipped a beat. There was already a line forming. For me. Readers who had spent months following Fallen Skies showed up in person, carrying fan art, wearing homemade costumes of my characters, even bringing gifts. Your story helped me through depression. Your art inspired me to start drawing again. You proved that no matter how much hate you get, you can rise. Each word pierced deeper than any insult ever had. These weren't numbers on a screen. They were real people, and my work had touched their lives. By the end of the day, I'd sold out every print I brought. My hands ached from signing, my throat was raw from talking, but my heart had never been so full. That night, when I finally collapsed onto my hotel bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I made it." The news back home. The next morning, the newspapers and blogs picked it up. Rising star of Webverse, Mira Sen lights up NovaCon. The article had a photo of me at my booth, surrounded by fans. My name, Mira Sen, in bold letters. When I came home, my mother hugged me so tightly I thought she'd never let go. My sister Arpita even called from Harvard, laughing and saying, "Looks like you're the famous one now." But my father, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. He walked past me like I was air. And when he finally did open his mouth, his words dripped with bitterness. "Enjoy your little moment. But fame is fleeting. Don't think this makes you equal to your sister." I didn't argue. I didn't need to, because I could see it. The tightness in his jaw, the way he avoided my eyes. My success had pierced his armor. The TV interview. The turning point came 2 weeks later. A local TV channel invited me for an interview. They wanted to cover the girl from our city making waves in the comic industry. Sitting under the studio lights, facing the camera, I was nervous. But when the interviewer asked me about the hardships I'd faced, I told the truth, about the doubt, the accusations, and the constant comparisons to my sister. I didn't name my father. I didn't need to. The weight of my words hung heavy. Enough. And then the interviewer asked, "What kept you going?" I smiled into the camera. Because I wanted to prove that even when the world tells you you're not enough, you can still rise. That failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the fight back. When the segment aired, messages poured in. Former classmates who had mocked me reached out with awkward congratulations. Distant relatives sent screenshots of the interview to my mother. And at dinner that night, as the TV replayed my face, I saw my father staring at the screen. He said nothing. But his silence was louder than any words. The quiet victory. Lying in bed that night, I thought about everything. The years of being overlooked, dismissed, compared. The tears, the hate, the betrayal, and now this. Fans, conventions, interviews, headlines, My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't screaming back at my father or
The
throwing
days
his
after the
insults
TV
in his
interview
face.
blurred together.
It was this.
Invitations
Living
poured
the
in,
life he said I could never
podcasts,
have.
guest panels,
And the sweetest part?
even collaboration
I was
offers
only just
from
getting
artists
started.
I had admired for years. My inbox was a storm of opportunity. Everywhere I went, people recognized my name. At cafes, strangers approached me shyly, asking if I was the Mira-sen who created Fallen Skies. For the first time in my life, the name that once felt like a curse carried weight. But at home, nothing changed. Or at least, that's what my father wanted me to believe. Cracks in the wall, he still sat at the head of the dining table, stiff-backed and silent. Still praised Arpita during her phone calls, telling relatives about her exams and internships. Still dismissed my successes as temporary, but I noticed the cracks, the way he lingered a second longer when I spoke about a new milestone. The way his jaw tightened when relatives mentioned my name before my sisters. The way he watched me, quietly, when he thought I wasn't looking. He was losing control. For years he had shaped the story of who I was. The failure, the irresponsible. Daughter, the shadow behind Arpita's light. But that story was unraveling, and he couldn't stop it. The award. The final blow came on a humid summer night. I had been nominated for the National Emerging Artist Award, a recognition that celebrated young creators across the country. When the email arrived, I thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. The ceremony was held in a grand auditorium in the capital, filled with journalists, cameras, and industry leaders. My mother insisted on coming with me. My father refused. Go. Play at your little event, he said coldly. It won't matter in the long run, but when I walked onto that stage, trembling in my new dress, and heard my name announced as the winner, the entire hall erupted in applause. For the first time, I wasn't a disappointment. I was a star. I held the heavy glass trophy in my hands and gave my speech, my voice shaking. I was told I would never be successful, that I would never measure up. But today, I stand here to prove that your worth is not defined by comparisons or doubt. It's defined by your persistence, by the fire you carry even when the world tries to put it out. The crowd rose to their feet, cameras flashed, and somewhere, I knew, my father was watching the broadcast. The confrontation, when I returned home. Late that night, trophy in hand, the house was silent. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering how proud she was. But my father sat in the living room, waiting. The TV was still on, replaying highlights from the ceremony. My face filled the screen. For a long time, he said nothing, just stared at me, then at the trophy. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, gruff. You've made a name for yourself. It wasn't praise, not exactly, but it wasn't the dismissal I expected either. I met. His eyes, steady and unflinching. I told you it was just the beginning. He looked away, his pride warring with something else, regret maybe, or shame. And in that silence, I realized I didn't need his approval anymore. The true revenge people always think revenge means destroying your enemy, making them bow, forcing them to admit they were wrong. But my revenge was different. It was living a life so full, so bright, that his words no longer mattered. It was the look on his face every time someone mentioned my success before my sisters. It was the way his silence grew heavier as the world celebrated me. It was knowing that the very daughter he dismissed would forever stand as proof of how wrong he had been.
And that weight? That was his punishment. A new dawn months later, I stood in my new studio apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows. My walls were covered in fan art, framed covers of fallen skies, and the award trophy gleaming on the shelf. I was no longer the invisible daughter, no longer the shadow of Arpita. I was Mira Sen, the creator, the fighter, the survivor. And as I sat at my desk, sketching the next chapter of my story, I smiled. Because the greatest revenge isn't shouting or proving someone wrong with words. It's living so fully, so loudly, that the very people who doubted you can only sit in silence, choking on the echo of your success. And my echo? It was just getting louder.